It's spooky season. Many people look forward to this time of year, both for the candy and for the costumes. But do you know the full history of how Halloween really started? Let's go over it together and find out if it's truly sinful or not. Halloween has ancient pagan roots. It was originally known as Samhain, a Celtic festival that dates back over 2,000 years. For the Celts, October 31st marked the end of summer and the beginning of winter, a season they connected with death and darkness. They believed that on that night, the boundary between the living and the dead became thin, that spirits could cross over with ease. People lit bonfires and wore costumes made of animal heads and skins to disguise themselves from evil spirits. They even left out food offerings to keep the dead appeased. When the Romans conquered Celtic lands, they blended their own festivals with these Samhain traditions. The Romans had their own Day of the Dead, called Feralia, when they brought food and gifts to graves to honor the dead. They also celebrated Pomona Day, a festival for the goddess of fruit and trees, symbolized by the apple. That's likely where the tradition of bobbing for apples began. Then, around 600 to 800 AD, the Christian church tried to replace these pagan practices with their own observances. They called November 1st All Saints' Day to honor martyrs and saints, and the night before became known as Hallows' Eve. Over time, that name evolved into Halloween. Still, many of the older traditions remained. People kept the costumes, bonfires, and focus on the dead. Only now, they mixed it with Christian language and customs. In the Middle Ages, something new began: souling. Poor people went door to door on Hallows' Eve, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for food, often little cakes called soul cakes. This practice eventually became what we now know as trick-or-treating. Around the same time, people started carving turnips and later pumpkins into lanterns to ward off evil spirits. When Irish immigrants brought these customs to America in the 1800s, Halloween slowly changed. By the 1900s, it had become a community-based, mostly secular holiday, centered on candy, costumes, and fun. But even today, its fascination with the occult, witches, and horror remains strong. So, how does all this go against what the Bible teaches? While much of modern Halloween may seem harmless, its origins and symbols are deeply spiritual, and often in ways that contrast biblical truth. Halloween is built around death, spirits, and darkness. Yet the Bible warns against contacting or honoring the dead. Deuteronomy 18:10-12 says, "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist or consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord." Halloween's focus on ghosts, witches, and spirits directly opposes God's commands. It also celebrates fear, death, and darkness, while Scripture calls us to walk in light. Ephesians 5:11 says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." We're called to reflect Christ's light, not to take part in symbols of evil or fear. As 1 John 1:5 reminds us, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. Even if people say it's just for fun, those symbols still glorify what God calls sinful and dangerous. Leviticus 19:31 warns, "Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them." And in Jeremiah 10:10 God says, "Do not learn the ways of the nations." Some Christians believe that celebrating Halloween, even in a harmless way, compromises their faith, blending worship of God with traditions made to honor false spirits. And today, Halloween often centers on indulgence, vanity, greed, and fear, things that pull our hearts away from holiness. Colossians 3:2 reminds us, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." You can choose to avoid Halloween entirely, maybe spending it in prayer or worship, or you can use it as an opportunity to share the gospel, to bring light where there's darkness. Because even though Halloween's roots are undeniably pagan, and its focus on death and fear stands against God's truth, some Christians use this time to shine light into the darkness. As John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." So, how does this change your outlook on Halloween? How can you live differently as a Christian during this time of year? God is calling you. Don't ignore it just because the world says it's okay. Know it by its works.